My love, wake up. Please, come back to us.
The final words of the High Elder, meant to bind King Robert and Lisa for eternity, died in the echoing silence of the lichened citadel. It was the sickening, silent collapse of Lisa's body that seized the breath of the thousand-strong assembly. Robert's powerful grip caught her before she could hit the marble, his iron gaze snapping down to the emerald-clad figure in his arms. Her skin was a ghastly white, and the delicate scent of her wedding perfume was utterly overpowered by an acrid, unnatural coldness that scraped violently against his inner wolf. This was not fear. This was not faintness. This was a violation. The dormant mate bond, which Robert had suppressed for months out of political necessity, roared to life in his chest. It didn't whisper of comfort. It screamed of deadly threat, recognizing the slow, insidious neurotoxin currently seizing his queen. The realization was a blinding flash of alpha rage. Someone in this hall, among these witnesses, had attempted regicide on their wedding day. Robert lifted his head, his crown glinting above his swooning bride, as seen in the image. His voice, usually a deep baritone, was amplified by pure alpha command, a seismic shock that ripped through the stunned silence. No one moves. This hall is sealed. By my decree, she is my queen, and this is an act of war. He strode from the altar. Lisa clutched fiercely against his armor and the soft fur of his mantle, delivering her personally to the royal infirmary. His orders were precise and terrifying. Within minutes, the entire wedding party, from minor delegates to major nobles, was under martial law. Beta Marcus, Robert's second, moved with grim efficiency, deploying specialized scent trackers and interrogation teams. The king's focus was already narrowed to the perpetually smirking Lord Valerius, whose calculated lack of surprise was, in Robert's eyes, a damning confession. The political arrangement was instantly dead. Only survival and vengeance remained. Robert ignored the healers bustling around him, his colossal presence dwarfing the infirmary cubicle. He had removed his heavy fur mantle and crown, but the polished black armor remained, a silent testament to his readiness for war. He stood over Lisa, who lay terrifyingly still on the cot. Her emerald gown was cut away where the healers needed access, revealing skin still too pale, too cold. He placed a hand, large and calloused from years of gripping sword hilts, flat against her forehead. "Stabilize the heart rate," he ordered, the tone a low, dangerous rumble directed not just to the healer but seemingly to Lisa's own struggling body. He focused his potent alpha essence, not in a crude burst but a careful, measured flow, trying to regulate the chaos the poison had sown in her system. This was beyond normal healing. This was his wolf, desperate and primal, attempting to knit his mate back together using sheer will. Every muscle in his body was coiled in tension, anticipating the next tremor in her pulse. Hours bled into one another. Marcus appeared twice, giving tense updates. Lord Valerius was under heavy guard, claiming outraged innocence. Robert waved him away without looking, the politics of the entire territory suddenly seeming like trivial dust compared to the shallow, rattling breaths in Lisa's chest. He had expected this marriage to be a cold stone of duty, a necessary pillar for his kingdom's foundation. He expected an alliance, not this frantic, consuming desperation. He was physically and mentally drained, yet the idea of taking a step back, of leaving her in the care of others, was abhorrent. I swore to protect the pack. She is the pack. But the lie was hollow. He wasn't protecting her because she was politically necessary. He was protecting her because beneath the veil of crisis, his wolf knew she was his. Every time her heart stuttered, a phantom pain shot through his own rib cage. The act of stabilizing her was an unconscious, profound weaving of their two beings. The political tool had vanished, replaced by a life-and-death necessity. He would not leave this cot until she was safe. His true fight was here, holding a feverish, poisoned stranger, realizing in this moment of intimate vulnerability that his entire future depended not on his crown, but on her recovery. The healers requested Robert's assistance. The toxins were making Lisa sweat profusely, requiring a change of clothing to regulate her temperature and prevent further irritation to her skin. Robert dismissed the female attendants, unwilling to allow anyone else this intimate access, even in a medical capacity. His hands, usually so adept at wielding a battle axe or signing treaties, moved with clumsy reverence as he helped the royal physician gently shift her onto her side. It was in that moment, as the last vestiges of the emerald silk fell away, that he saw it. Running from her left shoulder blade down toward her spine was a scar. Not a recent wound, but a long, jagged track of pale, puckered flesh. Perfectly healed, but irrevocably deep. It wasn't the kind of injury sustained in a petty skirmish. It was the mark of a savage attack, or perhaps a deliberate ritualistic punishment. Robert froze, the alpha essence he had been directing instantly seizing up. He knew the politics of Lisa's lesser clan family, their reputation for quiet diplomacy. This scar screamed of something else entirely, a fight, a survival story, a hidden history she had successfully buried beneath layers of deference and silence. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. The political pawn he thought he was marrying was not just fragile. She was battle-worn. The physician mistook his shock for revulsion. "My king, the damage is old. It poses no threat." "No," Robert corrected, his voice tight. He ran a single, gentle finger along the length of the mark. "It poses a question." He looked at her unconscious face, suddenly seeing past the pale bride to the resilient creature underneath. Why hide this? What trauma did this mark represent? And could this hidden strength, this capacity for profound secrecy and survival, be related to the enemy that struck her down today? The poison was a calculated weakness, but this scar was proof of a deeply buried, dangerous strength. The political threat was now compounded by the profound mystery of his own mate. Beta Marcus materialized silently by the infirmary door, his face a mask of exhaustion and focused aggression. He carried a scent of the cold stone cells deep beneath the keep. Robert, still perched on the stool by Lisa's head, signaled him forward with a curt gesture, unwilling to move far from his mate. "We have a source, my king. A scullery maid. Lower ranks, but loyal to Lord Valerius's former household. She crumbled under questioning, admitting to the delivery." Marcus's voice was low, cutting through the rhythmic hiss of a nearby breathing apparatus. "The poison. Identify it." Robert's command allowed no room for failure. Marcus consulted a small sealed scroll. A refined extract from the Night's Kiss bloom. It's a genius formulation designed to mimic natural, profound cardiac failure. A perfect, deniable political assassination. It would have appeared as if the young queen was too weak, too fragile, to withstand the pressure of the alpha bond, dying of a broken heart or fright. The scandal would have dissolved the alliance without a single drop of spilled blood from Valerius's men. Robert's hand clenched until his knuckles were white. The calculated cruelty of the plan, to use the very notion of feminine frailty to destroy his political stability and kill his mate, incensed him. It was a direct assault on the essence of his powerful kingdom. "The antidote?" Robert demanded, his wolf pushing dangerously close to the surface. Marcus hesitated, the silence loud and heavy. "The maid confessed to the source and the method, but she is sealed to silence on the antidote. A magical restraint, perhaps? Or a fear greater than our interrogation? She only confirms that a single specific counteragent exists, and she won't reveal its name or location. She's useless to us now, sire. The realization hit Robert. They had the who and the why, but the how to save her was still locked behind a servant's terror. His protective rage now had an intellectual target. This was not just a battle of strength, but a race against time, requiring him to uncover a hidden cure based on the very nature of the insidious poison. Lisa was still, but the room's atmosphere shifted, pulling Robert from his tense contemplation of the toxic bloom. A tremor ran through her body, a tiny defiant spasm of her muscles, indicating the poison was fighting a losing battle against her intrinsic will and his stabilizing alpha essence. Her eyes, clouded with fever, flickered open, locking onto Robert's face for a fleeting second of lucidity. She gasped, a shallow, rattling sound, not of pain, but of profound urgency. Her lips moved, dry and cracking, struggling to form words. Robert leaned in close, dismissing the concerned physician with a wave of his hand, needing to catch the whisper. The root, she managed, her voice thin as spun glass. Her gaze, however, was not directed at him, but fleetingly, fearfully, toward her left shoulder, the location of the dark, mysterious scar. The root, where it bends. The clarity vanished as quickly as it came. Her eyes rolled back, and she descended into a restless, fitful sleep, her pulse spiking once before settling back into a dangerous rhythm. Robert stared at the place she had indicated, the area of the jagged scar. Was she talking about the physical root of the poison? Or the root of the betrayal? Or perhaps the root of the trauma that gave her that terrible scar? Her brief moment of consciousness, born of a desperate will to survive, was a lifeline. It confirmed that she was fighting, that the passive political pawn was indeed a warrior beneath the silk. Robert felt a surge of respect and pride. This was no weak woman. His mate, even while poisoned, was giving him the key. The phrase, "where it bends," was a cryptic clue, a final, defiant effort from the victim to become the savior. Now Robert had to bridge the gap between botany, palace layout, and the secrets she kept buried beneath that scar. Robert stood by the cot reviewing the facts. The Knight's Kiss extract was rare and complex, meaning the antidote would be equally complex. The servant couldn't reveal it, and Lisa's cryptic clue, the root, where it bends, was useless for locating a raw component. But then, the cold, calculating logic of the political game struck him with chilling clarity. Valerius, the rival noble, hadn't simply destroyed the antidote, he had ensured its non-use. Why risk a search when you could eliminate the emergency response? He left Lisa's side and sought out royal healer Vanya, who had been diligently managing the medical emergency with an air of frantic professionalism. Robert cornered her in the herb laboratory, his shadow consuming her entirely. He didn't roar. He spoke with a terrifying stillness, focusing the full weight of his alpha aura on her. "The antidote," Robert stated, his gaze boring into her. "It was entrusted to you." Valerius knew the extraction was lethal and deniable, but he needed a fail-safe against capture. He guaranteed you possession of the counteragent, ensuring that in the event of failure, you would have the means to save yourself, or rather that you would be blackmailed into withholding it until it was too late. Healer Vanya's composure shattered. The fear radiating from her wasn't the fear of a murderer, but of a desperate, cornered loyalist. Tears streamed down her face, falling onto her pristine white smock. "My king, forgive me. They threatened my granddaughter. They gave me the counteragent weeks ago, a rare powder disguised as a foreign spice. I was told only to hold it, to forget it in the chaos. She sank to her knees, clutching his armored boot. I didn't want the queen to die, but I couldn't risk my bloodline. The antidote is still here, hidden in the South Wing storage under the name Lunar Salt. I begged him to let me use it, but he promised destruction if I interfered. Robert felt a surge of triumph mixed with utter disgust. The traitor wasn't just Valerius, but the complicit fear that permeated the pack. Now, he had the specific name and location, the final piece of the puzzle. The political crisis had just become a mission of life or death, delivered through a tearful confession. Robert wasted no breath on the whimpering healer Vanya. His alpha rage was cold, channeled entirely into forward motion. Lunar Salt, the antidote's absurd codename, was locked away in the rarely used South Wing storage. He moved with frightening speed, his armor clanking like a prophecy of doom, cutting through the deserted corridors. Every tick of the clock was another second the poison had to etch deeper into his queen. The South Wing was not secured by ordinary guards, but by the ancient pack defenses, wards laid down by his ancestors, designed to repel rival alphas and thieves alike. The main door was sealed by a complex series of shifting, magnetized runes, solvable only by those with the royal blood and years of study. Robert didn't have time for the proper sequence. He plunged his hand into the center of the shield, channeling pure alpha essence, a violent, forbidden act that risked burning out his own power, forcing the runes to obey through sheer dominance. The ancient lock screamed in protest, but it yielded, crumbling into dust. He burst into the dimly lit labyrinthine storage. Healer Vanya's confession only got him here. Finding the precise location of the hidden cache was the final hurdle. He searched wildly among centuries of forgotten relics and preserved herbs. That's when Lisa's cryptic whisper returned. The root, where it bends. Robert stopped, slamming his fist against a damp stone wall. The root. He looked down. He wasn't in a basement. This was the root, the foundation of the entire wing. He followed the corner until he reached a tight, angular bend in the wall, where the foundational piping was exposed. He located a loose stone behind the pipes, exactly where it bends. Using the jagged end of his sword hilt, he pried the stone free, revealing a small, velvet-lined bomb. Inside lay a single vial of crystalline powder labeled, in a delicate script, Lunar Salt. Clutching the cure like a holy relic, Robert didn't bother sealing the vault. He ran, the desperate hope of salvation overriding the king's duty to security. Lisa's life was the only treasure that mattered. Robert burst back into the infirmary, the small vial of lunar salt clenched so tightly in his gauntlet that the crystalline powder seemed to hum with potential energy. He ignored the gasps of the medical staff. Dismissing the royal physician with a glare, he took charge of the procedure himself, a move that was both deeply intimate and utterly authoritarian. He knew exactly the dosage and the method required, having studied every detail of the poison's properties in his youth. With a steady hand, he mixed the potent powder into a sterile liquid and, kneeling beside Lisa, administered the cure himself. The moment the antidote entered her bloodstream, it was like a massive jolt of electricity. Lisa's body arched, a silent scream trapped in her throat, and then she went utterly rigid, but the reaction didn't stop there. As the poison was forcibly expelled, a primal, searing heat erupted in Robert's own chest, the agonizing, wonderful pain of a true mate bond, snapping fully and finally into place. It was a physical marking, a deep, internal burn that mirrored the trauma the antidote inflicted. Robert bit back a howl, bracing himself on the cot. He felt every neuron in Lisa's body, the fight and the fear, the sudden rush of life, merging violently with his own alpha essence. The bond sealed, undeniable and absolute. Robert's eyes, momentarily flashing gold, scanned Lisa's face. The unnatural pallor was receding, replaced by a flush of raw vitality. The dark shadow that had haunted her had lifted. He leaned down, placing his forehead against hers. He could hear her thoughts, feel the deep, exhausted settling of her warrior spirit. The political arrangement was not just over, it had been incinerated, replaced by a sacred, agonizing connection forged in the crucible of death. They were marked now, both physically and emotionally, by this violent, desperate act of salvation. With Lisa stabilized and the mate bond violently sealed, Robert left the infirmary, his body now radiating an aura of lethal calm. He was no longer the political sovereign seeking stability. He was a wolf defending his territory and his mate. He returned to the sealed assembly hall, still crowded with jittery nobles, and found Lord Valerius waiting with a practiced expression of feigned concern. Robert wasted no time. He presented the captured servant, the tearful confession of the healer Vanya, and the vial of lunar salt as irrefutable proof of the elaborate assassination plot. The documentation was meticulous, leaving Valerius no room for plausible denial. The king's condemnation was swift and public, stripping Valerius of his titles, his lands, and his life, thereby eliminating the primary threat to the peace. The alliance, initially jeopardized by the plot, was now cemented by Robert's demonstration of ultimate, unwavering strength and justice. He had protected his own, proving his fitness to rule. Days later, back in the quiet safety of the royal suite, Lisa finally awoke. She was disoriented, but no longer sickly. The first thing she felt was the heavy, comforting presence of Robert, who slept in a chair beside her, his hand resting protectively over the patch of skin where the scar lay beneath the bandages. She remembered the fear, the cold grip of the poison, and then the incredible surge of heat, the moment the bond locked. When Robert woke, she met his eyes, not with the fearful deference of the political pawn, but with the quiet courage of a survivor. She knew everything that had transpired. She had witnessed his fight for her life, his sacrifice of political maneuvering for personal salvation. She didn't have to voice her thanks or her new understanding. Her silent acceptance, the faint, reciprocal pulse of the true mate bond between them, was the only confirmation Robert needed. She was no longer just his bride. She was his co-conspirator in survival, his warrior queen. 3 months passed, marked by Lisa's slow but complete recovery and the quiet, continuous strengthening of the mate bond. Robert had handled the political fallout with ruthless efficiency, consolidating power and securing his borders, proving that their union, though born of crisis, was the strongest foundation the kingdom had ever known. Lisa, now secure in her role and her mate's unconditional protection, was no longer silent. She spoke with quiet authority, advising Robert on clan dynamics and displaying a wisdom honed by her past survival. They decided against a public spectacle. The original wedding had been a political theater that nearly killed her. Their true mating would be an acknowledgement of their personal triumph. In the deepest, most sacred chamber of the citadel, by the glow of ancient, flickering wards, they stood alone before the High Elder once more. Lisa wore a simple, undyed silk gown that honored her past clan, and Robert wore no armor, only a tailored suit of dark velvet, signifying peace and intimacy over battle. The elder began the vows, but Robert reached out, stopping him. He looked directly into Lisa's eyes, the gold flecks in his turning molten. The first vows were a contract, Robert murmured, his large hand gently cupping her jaw. These are the truth. I chose you when you were weak. I choose you now that you are strong. You are not a pawn. You are my queen, my partner, and the heart of this pack. Lisa leaned into his touch, a genuine, joyful smile replacing the terrified mask she had worn months prior. "I accept this bond," she whispered, her hands finding the thick cords of muscle beneath his shirt. "My life is not for duty, but for you." The elder finished the final words. As they exchanged the mate mark, Robert's touch was tender, a profound seal of ownership and devotion. This time, the surge of the bond was pure, unadulterated ecstasy, cementing their shared future. They walked out of the chamber together, king and queen, stronger, wiser, and bound by a destiny that demanded they rule as one.